let's start at the beginning. What actually is NLP and where did it all come from? The thing about NLP is it's often talked about as a thing, as if NLP is actually an item in itself. And actually, as most NLPers, in fact any good NLPer will tell you, NLP is not really a thing. It was more a collection of things that's come from an experience called modelling, which I'm going to speak to you about in just a few minutes. In the early 1970s, there was a guy called Richard Bandler. And Richard Bandler was a student at University of Santa Cruz. And what happened was that he got involved in transcribing the work of a very famous psychologist called Fritz Perls. This guy down at the bottom here. Now, Fritz Perls was involved in a thing called Gestalt therapy. He was one of the grandfathers of Gestalt therapy and was very, very famous at that point. Many recordings existed of him, although on audio cassette at that point, just because it was the early 70s. And what happened was that Richard began to transcribe these works and these interviews and these sessions with clients. And quickly, because this is what Richard's talent is, he started to realise that there was patterns in what was happening. Now, as if you've ever get a chance to train with Richard, as Steve has, if you ever get a chance to train with him, you'll realise that actually he's a little bit of a maverick. Is that a good description for somebody that's a bit mad? And he will do things that maybe no other person will do. And one of the things that he did was that he decided to try and be Fritz. He started copying what Fritz Perls was doing and realised that just by speaking in those language patterns, that actually what was happening was that he was getting the same results. He knew very little about psychology. He knew a bit, but not as much as an experienced psychologist would. But he was getting these results. Clients were changing, people were experiencing life change, and this was actually the first ever NLP modelling experiment. What happened after that was he hooked in with this guy here. That's Grinder, not Grinder. That's a completely different thing. Now, this is John Grinder, who was a professor, assistant professor at the university. And what John brought a bit of rigour to the whole thing. A bit of intellectual, a bit of how do we process this in a way that actually we can teach it to other people. And to say that actually Bandler and Grinder, who are often talked about as the co-creators of NLP, and they were the early people who were behind the model and the movement of NLP, what actually happened then was there was many other names that started to associate into this, all of them doing these modelling experiences. So what do we mean by modelling? Modelling is the ability to look at what somebody does, to therefore find out how it is that it works, to copy it, to do it yourself, and here's where NLP made the difference, then to be able to code it and train someone else in how to do it and get the same result. To imagine that would be like being able to see someone, for instance, one of a place where NLP is very popular is in the world of golf, in the sport of golf. Imagine being able to watch what somebody does mindset-wise, the way that they hold their hands, the way that they hold their body, the way they hold their muscles, thinking, physiology, everything. And to code it into a way where you can say, okay, I can now train you in how to get that same result. The same with psychology. It's obviously very famous as a therapy and coaching model. And this is one of the things that we use it for. I can bring someone in, Steve can bring someone into a training course, and within minutes, within half an hour, we could show them a technique that would be able to remove phobias, like lifelong phobias, in minutes. You don't need to know the background of it, you just need to know here are the steps that you do, and how was that done? It was all done through modelling. Now, you'll see another couple of names here, and they're massively important because these are two of the key people who were modelled in the creation of the techniques of NLP. Number one, Milton Erickson, who was actually the second person that they modelled, but Milton Erickson was a hypnotherapist. And he was very talented at medical hypnosis and using hypnosis for life change. In fact, it's because of Erickson that we can now talk about hypnosis in a normal way without people freaking out and thinking it's some sort of magic. Milton Erickson was amazing at what he did, and actually Bandler, Grinder, a man called Frank Pusalik, another guy called Robert Dilts, they were all involved, another guy called Stephen Gilligan. We're all involved in the modelling of Milton Erickson, finding out how Erickson did what he did and how can we then train it. And then another lady called Virginia Satir, and Virginia Satir was a world famous family therapist. She wrote an amazing book called People Making that you can still buy at the moment actually if you wish. And people making is all about how do families work and how do we make people? How do we bring people up through families where we're actually making them into personalities? One of the things that they modelled off Virginia was her language patterns and her way of questioning, which now is called the meta model. Interestingly enough, what they modelled off Milton Erickson, I don't know how this worked, but actually got his name and is called the Milton model. This is a very brief history of where NLP came from, and there are many names, some of which you may recognise. Tony Robbins, Tad James, Robert Dilts, who we've already mentioned. There are many, many names out there. Michael Neal, who you may know, who now does a thing called 3 Principles, but was for a long time a very famous NLP trainer and a fantastic one at that. And of course, Steve and I, who are obviously like right up here. In fact, we really should have our names up here as well and next to them. But the great thing about NLP is because it's about modelling, is that it never stands still. And in all seriousness, Steve and I have done our own modelling experiences and modelling things on people that we respect and look up to that then become part of our courses and what we do. In fact, we're going to show you one a little bit later on. This is what modelling is, and this is what NLP is. People think that NLP is techniques, but actually it's not. NLP is actually the modelling process that allows those techniques to happen. Out of the back of NLP, we have some amazing techniques for business, for training and teaching, for therapy, for self-development, and that's fantastic. But imagine being able to model someone that you respect in whatever field it is that you're in. Imagine what that would be like, to be able to look at them, find out what they do in such a way that you can then just go in and just be able to make it part of what you do so that you can get better results, or maybe someone else that you're helping. Steve's going to talk to you in a little minute about what NLP actually stands for and what it is in a little bit more detail. But it's important to know the foundations. And I look forward to speaking to you in another few minutes when I'll tell you a little bit more about how we can actually apply NLP and how the whole thing works.